Hear now the beginning of a tale without end, a saga carved into the stones of time, a story of fire, shadow, and the fragile hearts of mortals. This is the kingdom of Avelora, a land born of myth, where kings and queens rule beneath banners of gold, where villages cling to survival on the edges of ancient forests, and where whispers older than empires drift through the night. Here, fate stirs in the unlikeliest of places, not in palaces or in councils of war, but in the quiet fields of Greenhollow, where a boy named Eryn dreams of a life beyond the plough. He does not yet know that within him burns the fire of ages, a power thought lost to time, a power that will draw the gaze of kings, the wrath of raiders in black armour, and the endless call of the Elderwood. Beside him walk Kaelen, his brother forged of strength and loyalty, and Lyra, the neighbour girl whose courage will cut paths where steel cannot. Together they will be thrust from their small world into a storm that reaches across kingdoms, a storm that will never cease. For the tale of Avelora is not a tale of one life, nor of one war, nor even of one age. It is a river of stories flowing ever onward, branching, colliding, never still. This is no mere story you are about to hear. This is the endless chronicle, the song without a final verse, the fire that will never burn out. This is the epic of Avelora, the village of Greenhollow. The wind moved gently through the fields of barley, carrying with it the smell of tilled earth and wood smoke. In the distance, the bells of Greenhollow rang noon, though few paid them any mind. Farmers bent low over their work. Children chased one another between cottages of timber and thatch. Life in the village was simple, steady, and at least on the surface unchanging. But not for Eryn. At 15, he often found himself staring beyond the fields toward the shadow of the Elderwood Forest. The trees rose like black-green walls against the horizon, hiding secrets that no villager dared to chase. His father said the forest was cursed. His brother Kaelen laughed at the very idea, and yet something inside Eryn stirred whenever he looked that way, as if the trees were calling. Today, though, he wasn't alone in his wandering thoughts. "Eryn!" Lyra's voice carried across the meadow. She ran toward him, brown hair streaming, a basket in her hands. At 14, she already carried herself with a boldness that few dared match. "You're dreaming again," she teased, her eyes sparkling. "One day, you'll wander so far inside your head, we'll have to drag you back out." Eryn smiled faintly, brushing dirt from his palms. "Maybe I'm meant for more than this," he said quietly, almost to himself. Neither of them noticed the crow watching from the fence post, its black eyes unblinking. Nor did they see the red sun dim behind a gathering of storm clouds, though the omen would not go unheeded for long, because change had already begun. Eryn's words lingered in the warm air, quickly swallowed by the rustle of barley and the distant shouts of villagers. Lyra tilted her head, the teasing in her expression softening into something more thoughtful. "You sound like one of the old stories," she said, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "Heroes always say things like that, right before their lives are turned upside down." Eryn chuckled, though the sound carried a nervous edge. "Then I'll be careful what I say." Before Lyra could answer, a sharp clang echoed from the village square, the sound of the bell tower, but not its usual steady ring for prayer or mealtime. This was hurried, uneven, urgent. Kaelen appeared at the crest of the path leading back into Greenhollow, his stride long and his face tight with concern. He waved an arm at them. "Come quickly," he shouted. "Riders, strangers at the gate." The words pulled the breath from Eryn's chest. Strangers rarely came to Greenhollow. Fewer still arrived on horseback. Lyra's basket slipped against her hip as her eyes widened. Eryn glanced once more toward the dark line of the Elderwood, before turning to run beside his brother and Lyra. Something stirred in his chest again, stronger this time, more insistent. Change had not only begun, it had arrived. Chapter 4. Departure. The sun had not yet risen when Greenhollow began to break apart. Smoke still lingered in the air from the attack, carrying the smell of ash and sorrow. Villagers moved quietly between homes and barns, gathering what they could carry. Chickens were stuffed into baskets, tools bound with rope, children held close by frightened parents. Eryn stood at the edge of it all, numb. He had lived every day of his life here, chasing Lyra through fields, hauling water beside Kaelen, listening to his father curse at stubborn oxen. Now it was slipping away like sand through his fingers. Kaelen strapped a pack to his back, his movements sharp with controlled anger. He had not spoken much since the night of the raid, but the set of his jaw told enough. Lyra bustled between her grandmother's house and the square, arms full of bundles, her cloak flaring behind her. She looked determined, even as fear shadowed her eyes. Their father, Tom, approached at last. He looked older than Eryn remembered, his hair greyer, his hands shaking as they rested on his son's shoulders. "You're leaving," Tom said. It wasn't a question. Kaelen nodded grimly. "The riders are right. It's not safe here. If they come again, we won't hold." Tom's eyes found Eryn's. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled with all the words they had never spoken. Pride, fear, love, buried under years of toil. Finally, Tom said, "You have your mother's eyes. She always believed there was more to you than this land. I never wanted to admit it. I thought if I kept you close, I could keep you safe." His voice broke. "But I can't." Eryn's chest ached. He wanted to throw his arms around his father, to promise he would return, that nothing would change. But he couldn't lie not when the fire in his blood whispered otherwise. "I'll come back," he said softly. "I swear it." Tom pulled him into a rough embrace. When he let go, his eyes were wet. "Go," he whispered, "before I change my mind. The road begins." By dawn, the company was ready. Captain Darien mounted his horse, the silver falcon on his cloak catching the pale light. His red-haired companion, Sir Caldus, Eryn had learned rode beside him. Behind them, a ragged line of villagers stretched along the road, carts piled high, children bundled in blankets. Eryn walked with Kaelen and Lyra near the front, his pack light, but his heart heavy. The Elderwood loomed to their right, its black-green shadows watching silently as they passed. Lyra kept her voice low. "Do you think your father will be all right?" Eryn nodded, though the motion felt hollow. "He'll manage. He always has." Kaelen glanced at him. "We'll come back one day, rebuild, stronger than before." His tone was firm, as though daring the world to prove him wrong. The road wound westward, the forest pressing close. Crows flitted between the branches, their cries harsh in the still air. Eryn's skin prickled each time one passed overhead. Captain Darien kept a sharp eye on him. More than once, Eryn caught the man watching, his gaze not unkind, but heavy with meaning. Finally, Eryn could stand it no longer. He quickened his pace to walk beside the rider. "Why do they want me?" he asked quietly. "Those men in black armour, they came straight for me." Darien's jaw tightened. "Because you carry fire. I don't understand." "You don't need to. Not yet. What matters is this. The fire is older than kings, older than castles. Long ago, it burned in the hearts of heroes who shaped the realm. It was thought gone forever. But it has woken again in you." He leaned down, voice low. "And that means both salvation and danger." Eryn swallowed hard. "And the forest, the whispers." Darien's gaze flicked toward the Elderwood. "There are things better left unspoken. If it calls to you, resist it." But Eryn wasn't sure he could. Campfire Confessions. That night they camped by the riverside. Villagers huddled near the fire, whispering prayers, while the riders kept watch. Kaelen sparred with a wooden stave, striking at the air until sweat darkened his tunic. Lyra sat beside Eryn, her basket beside her, staring into the flames. "You were brave," she said suddenly. Eryn blinked. "What?" "In the battle. You didn't run. You stood your ground, even when—" She hesitated. "Even when fire poured out of you." "I wasn't brave," he said bitterly. "I was terrified. I didn't even know what I was doing. If it hadn't worked, I'd be dead." "That's what bravery is," Lyra said softly. "Doing something even when you're terrified." Eryn stared at her, the firelight painting her face in gold and shadow. For a moment, he wanted to believe her. Kaelen joined them, dropping heavily onto the grass. "Bravery won't be enough. Next time they come, we'll need more than fire. We'll need steel and training." His eyes fixed on Eryn. "If you're chosen for something, then you need to be ready for it. No more staring off into the distance like a dreamer." Eryn bristled. But before he could retort, Darian's voice cut through the camp. "Rest while you can. Tomorrow will be harder." The fire crackled. Above them, the stars burned cold and bright, and the forest loomed in silence. The omen. Deep into the night, Eryn woke. The camp was quiet, the only sounds the snore of sleeping villagers and the river's murmur. The crow sat nearby, black feathers gleaming in starlight. He sat up slowly. The bird's eyes fixed on him, unblinking. Then, without warning, it spread its wings and flew into the forest. Eryn felt the pull again, stronger now, irresistible. He rose and followed. The trees swallowed him, their shadows pressing close. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of moss and damp earth. His footsteps crunched softly on the leaves. At last, he reached a clearing. In its centre stood a stone, taller than a man, carved with runes that glowed faintly red. The crow perched atop it, silent. Eryn's breath caught. He stepped closer, his hand trembling as he reached toward the stone. Whispers filled the clearing louder, sharper. Words he almost understood. The path, the fire, the storm. The runes flared brighter. Eryn. He spun to see Lyra behind him, her cloak wrapped tight, her eyes wide. "What are you doing?" "I don't know," he whispered. "It's calling me." "Then stop listening." Before he could answer, the stone pulsed, sending a ripple through the ground. The crow took flight with a harsh cry. Eryn stumbled back, his heart pounding. When he looked again, the runes had gone dark. Lyra seized his hand. "We need to go back, now." They slipped through the trees, returning to the camp just as the first light of dawn touched the horizon. No one stirred, as if nothing had happened. But Eryn knew everything had changed. The fire was waking, and it would not be ignored. Chapter 5. The Road Narrows. The company broke camp at first light, though the villagers moved slower than the riders liked. Ox carts creaked beneath the weight of belongings. Children cried from weariness, and the old lagged behind. Captain Darian's orders cracked like whips, urging them onward, but the march was heavy with exhaustion. Eryn walked beside Lyra and Kaelen, the memory of the glowing stone burning in his mind. He hadn't told Kaelen. He wasn't sure he dared. Even Lyra had said nothing, though her occasional glance reminded him she had not forgotten. By mid-morning, the road narrowed, the forest pressing close on both sides. Branches clawed overhead, turning the path into a tunnel of green shadow. The air smelled damp, rich with moss and decay. Every creak of the trees felt like a threat. Darian raised a hand, signalling a halt. He scanned the woods, his sword half drawn. "We are watched," he said softly. Kaelen gripped his stave. "Where?" Darian shook his head. "Everywhere. The villagers muttered nervously, clutching children and baskets. Caldus urged them forward, but the mood grew taut as a drawn bowstring. Eryn felt the whisper stir again, brushing the edge of his thoughts like cold fingers. They are near. Fire. Answers. Fire. He clenched his fists until his nails dug into his palms. A warning in the shadows. Hours passed without incident, but the tension never lifted. Then, just as the sun reached its peak, a shape flickered between the trees. A rider, black-armoured. He sat astride a horse, as dark as coal, visor gleaming, motionless as a statue. Then, as the company turned to look, he was gone. The villagers panicked. Some screamed, others ran toward the carts. Darian barked for order, his sword flashing in the light. "They test us! Keep moving!" But fear spread like wildfire. The raiders were not gone. They were toying with them, circling unseen. Eryn's skin crawled. Every shadow felt alive. Every branch seemed to hold eyes. Fire within. That night they camped uneasily. No fires allowed, lest the glow draw enemies. The company huddled in darkness. The only light, the pale gleam of stars. Children whimpered, mothers hushed them, men clutched farm tools like weapons. Eryn lay awake, staring into the trees. His blood hummed with restless heat, the memory of the stone alive in his chest. He knew the raiders were out there, waiting. Lyra shifted beside him, her voice barely a whisper. "You feel it too, don't you?" He turned his head. "Feel what?" The storm coming closer. Her eyes glimmered faintly in the dark. "My grandmother said some people are born with the gift of knowing. You have it. And it frightens me." Eryn swallowed hard. "It frightens me too." Kaelen stirred, but did not wake. His brother's face was slack in sleep. Yet even then, it carried the tension of someone bracing for battle. Eryn closed his eyes, but rest never came. Only the whisper. Only the fire. Dawn. At dawn, they marched again. The forest thinned, opening toward the rolling hills that would lead them west. Relief washed over. Chapter 10. The Scarred Walls. The keep was scarred, but still standing. Smoke still curled from broken windows, the scent of charred stone heavy in the air. Guards patrolled the inner halls with grim faces, their armour dented, their eyes shadowed by fatigue. The clash of the night still echoed faintly, as though the stones themselves remembered the screams. Eryn walked among the wounded, Kaelen at his side. Every few steps, villagers and soldiers alike looked up at him with wide eyes. Some whispered blessings, others crossed themselves in silent prayers. The boy with fire, the king's weapon, the one who saved us. Each word felt like another chain. Lyra knelt beside a young guard, binding his wound with strips of linen. Her hands were steady, her face pale but determined. When she caught Eryn's eye, she gave him a small nod reassurance, or perhaps defiance. Kaelen muttered under his breath. "They stare at you like you're some kind of god." "I'm no god," Eryn whispered. "Try telling them that." Council in crisis. By midday, the council was summoned to the great chamber. The mood was heavy, the air thick with the stink of smoke and the metallic tang of blood. King Alden sat at the head of the table, his expression carved from stone. Queen Serenia stood beside him, her dark gaze sweeping the room. Darian delivered the report. The raiders had breached the outer gates through tunnels, long thought collapsed, aided by traitors within the walls. Scores were dead, more wounded. "They will strike again," he finished grimly. "Stronger, bolder." The lords erupted into arguments. "We must tighten the walls. We must burn the traitors out." "No, strike them first. Drive them into the hills." The old priest slammed his staff. "You bring this doom upon us. The fire draws them like moths to flame." His eyes burned as they turned on Eryn. "Cast it out, or cast him out." The chamber fell silent. Eryn stood frozen under the weight of every eye. He wanted to shout that he had not asked for this, that the fire was not his choice. But the words lodged in his throat. The Queen's voice cut through. Calm, steady. "The boy is no curse. Without him, the raiders would have reached this very chamber. Without him, we would all be ash." The king lifted a hand, silencing the room. His voice was iron. "The raiders came for the fire. They will not stop. If we wait, they will bleed us dry, one raid at a time." His eyes fell on Eryn. "We march to war." A ripple of shock swept the chamber. The king's gaze was unyielding. "And the boy marches with us." Kaelen's fury. After the council, Kaelen exploded. "They want you on the front lines," he shouted, slamming a fist against the stone wall of the corridor. "Like you're nothing but a sword they can wave at their enemies." Eryn winced. "What else can I do, Kael? If the raiders keep coming—" "You're 15, Kaelen roared. His chest heaved, his eyes blazing. "You should be in the fields, not in their wars, not burning yourself to ash for a king who doesn't care if you live or die." Eryn swallowed hard. "Would you rather Greenhollow burned again? Would you rather—" His voice cracked. "Would you rather they take me and everyone else suffers?" Kaelen's fury faltered, replaced by something heavier. He gripped Eryn's shoulders, his voice breaking. "I'd rather have my brother." The silence between them said what neither could. The boy Kaelen had known was already gone, burned away by fire and fate. The Queen's warning. That night, Eryn was summoned again to the Queen's garden. The roses were blackened at the edges, ash drifting among the petals. Serenya's face was pale, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "You stood against the shadow and lived," she said softly. "Few ever have." Eryn's hands trembled. "It nearly killed me." Her gaze deepened. "It will try again, and again, until you are claimed or broken. The Ashen Lord will not stop." The name sent a chill through him. "Who is he?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "A king before kings. A tyrant who sought to bind the fire to his will. When he was cast down, his spirit lingered in the dark. His servants became the raiders, his will their command. And he wants me." Her eyes gleamed. "He wants the fire. You are only the vessel." Eryn shuddered. The Queen's hand touched his cheek, cool and steady. "But you are more than a vessel. Do not forget that." The march. Within days, the city roared with preparation. Smiths worked day and night, forging blades and armour. Soldiers drilled in the courtyards, their cries echoing against the scarred walls. Caravans loaded with supplies rolled toward the gates. The villagers of Greenhollow were given shelter in the lower city, though many wept as they watched Eryn leave with the king's army. Kaelen marched at his side, spear in hand, his jaw set. Lyra walked close, her eyes sharp, her grandmother's runes stitched into her cloak. The king rode at the front, banners streaming, his presence unshakable. Behind him, thousands of soldiers filled the road, their armour flashing like waves of steel. Eryn looked back once, at the city's white walls gleaming in the sun. For a moment, he wondered if he would ever see them again. The crow circled above, its cry carrying on the wind. The march to war had begun. The first skirmish. It came on the 4th day. Scouts returned breathless, reporting black riders ahead. The king ordered the army into formation, shields locking, spears braced. Eryn's heart pounded as he stood between Kaelen and Lyra, his palms burned, the fire eager. The raiders emerged from the hills like a tide of shadows. Black armour gleamed, horns wailed, and the ground shook with the thunder of hooves. The clash was brutal. Steel rang on steel, screams filled the air, and the stench of blood and smoke smothered the plain. Kaelen fought like a storm, his stave cracking helms, his fury unyielding. Lyra darted through the chaos, blade flashing, pulling the wounded to safety. Eryn held the fire as long as he could. Sparks, bursts, controlled streams. But then the raiders broke the line, and panic surged. He let go. Flame roared from him, sweeping across the battlefield. Raiders burned, their armor glowing white-hot, their screams cutting through the din. Soldiers cheered, driven forward, but when the flames died, the field was a graveyard. Smoke rose from charred corpses, and the earth was blackened where Eryn had stood. Kaelen stared at him, face pale. Lyra's eyes shone with tears, and Eryn felt only emptiness. Nightfall. That night, the camp was silent. Even victory tasted like ash. Eryn sat apart, staring at his hands. They were blistered, raw, but the fire still hummed beneath the skin. Kaelen approached, dropping heavily beside him. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, softly, "You saved us again." Eryn shook his head. "Or doomed us faster. Every time I use it, they come. Stronger, closer." Lyra knelt on his other side, her cloak brushing the dirt. "Then we'll be ready when they do, together." The three of them sat in silence, the crackle of campfires distant. Above, the crow circled, its silhouette etched against the stars. And in the darkness beyond the camp, something vast stirred, its breath heavy as thunder. The storm was only beginning. Chapter 11. The Siege of the Pass. The army reached the high country, under a sky the colour of old iron. Hills gave way to broken ridges, and ridges lifted into the first steep teeth of the mountains. The wind-up here smelled of stone and frost. It scoured banners and rattled harness, and set even hardened soldiers to pulling their cloaks tight. Darien called a halt beneath a spine of rock where the road narrowed to a ledge no wider than a cart. Falcon Ridge Pass, the captain named it, after the falcons that nested in the crags and the crest he wore on his cloak. It was the last reliable way through to the eastern marches, and every tale agreed on two things. You could hold 1,000 men with 100 here if you were ready, and if you were not, the pass would become a grave for all. Scouts returned with faces salt white from wind and fear. "Tracks, Captain," one panted. "Horses shod black. Many. They've camped ahead, right where the road pinches between the fallen columns." "Columns?" Lyra asked under her breath. "Old work," Darien said, eyes on the ridgeline. "Ruins from a time before kings. The road runs between them like a gate." He turned in the saddle. "We'll go no farther today. Shields up, fires low, archers on the west wall, pikes on the road. If they come tonight, they'll find us ready." Men moved like a stirred anthill. Stakes were driven. Carts pulled nose to tail to make a barrier. The king's standard crimson and gold was stripped from its pole and furled to keep it from advertising their position to whatever waited in the stone throat ahead. Eryn stood with Kaelen and Lyra near the inner line, watching the road disappear into the choke of the pass. The world beyond was a mouth of shadow. "You feel it?" Lyra whispered. He did. Not the gentle pull of the elderwood, the sweet, rain-soaked earth that cooled like a memory, but something harsher, ash-dry, scraping at the inside of his chest. The fire in him stirred in answer, restless as a caged hawk. Kaelen rested his stave across his shoulder. "Let them come. We hold here." Eryn wanted to believe him. He wanted to believe walls and wood and a line of men could do what villages could not. He closed his eyes and tried to breathe slow. The fire hummed with every heartbeat. Above them, the crow cut a black line against the clouds, circled once, and vanished into the teeth of the pass. Night watch. Dusk crawled up the rock. Fires were banked under lids of stone. A thin stew made its miserable round, and men tried to pretend the smell of panic wasn't stronger than the onion. Darien came on silent feet, as he always did, and crouched near Eryn. In the dying light, the captain's weathered face looked carved from the same stone they leaned against. "You kept us alive at the skirmish," he said, not unkindly. "You'll need to do more than that now." "I don't know what else there is," Eryn admitted. "Every time I let it out, it goes farther than I mean." "That is how rivers become floods," Darian said. "But a river can be banked." He pointed to the pass mouth, where the road ran between two fallen pillars, black with age. "They'll try to break us there. We'll give them nothing but a wall of spears and a narrow throat to choke on. Your task is not to burn the mountain, boy. It's to make a door where there's none, and close it when we say." "A door?" "Fire that opens and shuts at your will. A barrier when they rush. A path when we push. Think in shapes, not in fury." Shapes. The word lodged behind Eryn's eyes. He nodded. Lyra joined them, fingers pale around a strip of chalk and a twist of blue thread. "My grandmother taught me a binding circle, small, quick. It doesn't stop a blade, but it steadies the hand that stands inside it." She met Eryn's gaze. "If I mark one at your feet, will you stand in it?" Eryn looked at the chalk like it might be a sword she offered. "If it helps," Kaelen snorted. "If it helps, I'll stand in 3. 3 won't make you smarter," Lyra said, but the corner of her mouth tugged up. The wind came colder. Somewhere in the dark, a horn sounded a low, mournful note. Men stiffened. Hands found hafts and hilts. Darian rose. Positions. The first rush. They came with the night. Helms like iron skulls. Mail draped in strips of blackened leather. Horses with their breath white in the cold and their eyes red as embers. No banner, as ever. No cry of a lord's name. Only horns and the drum, drum, drum of hoof on stone. Archers loosed from the west wall. Arrows rattled off plates or found seams and made black figures tumble. Pikes lowered. The first riders hit the cart barricade and the world slammed into noise. "Now," Lyra hissed at Eryn. She was already on her knees, chalk dragging a clean white circle around his boots, blue thread tied in 3 swift knots at the northern point. The mark looked laughably small against the mountain. It felt like a promise all the same. Eryn drew breath, thought of shapes, of doors. He lifted his hands and let the fire rise, not as a roar, not as a flood, but as a line. A thin, bright arc he laid across the mouth of the pass, like a bar drawn to hold back a door. It burned. By the gods, it burned. Heat curled his hair and seared his palm, even as it sang to something in his blood. The first riders who reached it screamed as their horses threw back, singed and wild. The line wavered. "Hold, Darian," from everywhere and nowhere. Eryn held. The binding circle thrummed against his boot soles, a rhythm like a heartbeat that wasn't his. The flame steadied, thin as a scythe, bright as the noon sun. "Archers down," Darian's voice. "Pikes push." Kaelen roared with the others and thrust in tandem, his stave sliding under a rider's arm to rip him from the saddle. Behind him, farmers with tool hafts and city boys in ill-fitting mail drove forward in a single cruel wave. The black riders reeled. Those behind pressed forward, crushed by those ahead. Horses screamed. The smell of scorched hair and old grease stung Eryn's throat. Something struck his shoulder, a stone from a sling or a shard from a shattered cart, and he staggered. The flame line fluttered. Lyra's hand closed around his forearm. "Breathe." Her voice didn't tremble. "Breathe and keep the shape." He did. The line held. For the first time since Greenhollow, Eryn felt the fire obey him, and not the other way around. Then the horn sounded again, a different note, higher and hungrier. The shadows moved. They came like smoke, uncoiling from the cracks, not men, but the shapes that had walked the king's hall half seen, half formed, edges fraying and reforming, eyes crimson cinders. They flowed around their own, as water flows around stones, and slid under the pale bar of flame, as if it was nothing at all. Eryn swore. Shadows. Archers aim for the riders. Leave the wraiths to the flame. Darian's blade flashed, its edge catching torchlight, as he hacked a shadow to tatters that curled and crawled back together. Shapes, Eryn thought. If a line would not stop smoke, then perhaps a wall would. He lifted both hands. The fire howled. The chalk circle hummed like a struck bell. He drew the line up, up, and up into a sheet, a bright, translucent veil that stretched from fallen column to fallen column, a curtain stamping the very air with heat. The first shadow hit it and shrieked like metal drowned in water. It did not pass through, it burned. The next struck and skirled. Heat rolled back over the barricade in waves. Men ducked and swore, eyes watering, but they held. Kaelen's grin was a wild slash of teeth. "That's it, little brother. Don't distract him," Lyra snapped, but she was smiling too, sweat bright on her brow. For heartbeats, the pass belonged to them. Then the fire in Eryn changed. It jolted, like a horse sensing a rider's fear. The humming steadied, then faltered. A pressure built under his ribs, an answering pull, low and cold. From the dark behind the riders, a taller shape stepped into the torchlight. Not smoke, not man. Its armour was black, but it did not reflect flame. It seemed to drink it. Around its helm a haze of ash shimmered, as if the air refused to touch it. Eryn knew it before it spoke. He knew it from the hall and from his dreams. "Warden," the whisper in him said. "A hand of the Ashen Lord." The warden lifted its gauntleted hand, and the heat in the pass strangled. Eryn's wall guttered like a candle in a draught. "No." He dug his heels into the chalk, hauled at the fire with both hands. The wall brightened, dimmed, brightened. The warden made a fist. The fire buckled. Lyra's fingers bit his sleeve hard enough to bruise. "Eryn, the white fire, the way you burned the shadow in the hall. Do you remember?" He saw the runes. He saw the crow above them, and the white that wasn't heat so much as clarity. Not a flame that devoured, but a flame that declared. He reached not outward, not to the seething hunger that wanted to run, but inward, down to the ember, at his centre that pulsed with his own breath. The wall changed. It went pale and terrible. Heat remained, but under it ran something cleaner, a soundless note that made teeth ache and shadows recoil. The warden took one step forward. The white brightened. It took another, slow as a man walking into a river in winter. "Archers," Darian said, low and fierce. "Put your shafts in anything that casts a shadow." Kaelen laughed, breathless and hoarse, and drove his stave into a rider's knee. Bone cracked. The rider toppled. "Come on then! Come on!" The warden lowered its hand. The pressure did not ease. It changed. A different horn sounded from deep within the pass, no signal Eryn knew. The riders backed. The shadows sloughed away like fog closing over a path. "Hold," Darian warned. "Hold." They were gone. The pass mouth emptied as if it had only ever been a trick of light and smoke. Only the dead remained, and the heat shimmer above the pale The silence that followed was almost unbearable. The echo of the crow's shriek seemed to hang in the air, a wound carved into the night. Eryn staggered back, his hands trembling, smoke rising faintly from his skin where the strange light had poured forth. His chest heaved as though he had run for miles, yet all he had done was stand before the ruin and unleash something. Something vast. Something terrible. Lyra reached him first. Her face was pale, eyes wide, the basket she had carried earlier, now long forgotten. Eryn, your hands. He glanced down. His palms were raw, the lines of his skin etched with faint, glowing traces that pulsed like veins of fire before fading to nothing. They stung, but the sting was nothing compared to the dread rising in his heart. I didn't mean to, he whispered hoarsely. His voice cracked, like a boy on the edge of tears. It just happened. Kaelen pushed forward, planting himself between his brother and the lingering smoke where the runes had once burned. His spear trembled in his grip, but his voice was iron. You didn't do this, Eryn. This was already here waiting. Don't take the blame for whatever curse this place carries. But even as he said it, Kaelen's eyes betrayed him. He had seen. He had felt the heat that radiated from Eryn's outstretched hands, the force that had seared centuries-old magic into nothing. This was no curse of stone or forest. This had been Eryn. From the trees came the low rustle of wings. The crow returned, settling upon a skeletal branch. Its black eyes reflected the faint glow of the dying embers, unblinking, endless. Lyra swallowed hard. It's watching us, she said, voice barely more than breath. Kaelen tightened his grip on the spear. Then let it watch. We should leave this place. Now. But before they could move, before they could even take a step, a voice rose deep, resonant, and not entirely human. It came not from the air around them, but from the stones themselves, vibrating through the earth beneath their feet. The fire has awakened. Eryn froze, his blood running cold. The ruins shuddered, dust drifting from cracks that had long been silent. From beneath the shattered altar, where the runes had burned away, a faint light glimmered, red as embers, buried deep in a hearth. The ground trembled once, then again, and from the cracks came a low rumble that was not mere stone breaking, but something older, something alive. Kaelen pulled Eryn back, shielding him instinctively. What is it? Lyra clutched at Erin's arm. We shouldn't be here. We never should have come. The crow took flight, wings beating once, twice, before disappearing into the depths of the Elderwood. It did not call this time. It fled. The light grew brighter, spilling up through the broken altar until it formed a thin, searing fissure in the ground, and then suddenly it went dark. The trembling stopped. The ruin fell silent once more. Only the three of them remained in the clearing, staring at the place where something had almost broken through. They did not speak again until the village fires came into view. By then, the sun had long since fallen, leaving only a bruised sky and the flicker of torches marking Greenhollow's boundaries. The bells rang faintly in the distance, uneven, hurried. Not the steady toll of noon or supper, but an alarm. Kaelen cursed under his breath and quickened his pace. Something's wrong. They broke into a run. By the time they reached the edge of the village, the cause was clear. The cottages of the northern row, those nearest the road, burned with unnatural flame. The fire was too quick, too fierce, leaping from thatch to timber with ravenous hunger. Villagers screamed and scattered, hauling buckets from the well, forming lines to pass water hand to hand. But even as they fought the fire, figures moved within it, tall, armoured, faceless. Raiders. Eryn's stomach dropped. He had seen travellers in Greenhollow before, soldiers marching between kingdoms, merchants hauling wares. But these were not like them. These figures were clad in black steel that gleamed red with the firelight, their helmets smooth and without mark, their blades long and dripping with ruin. Kaelen did not hesitate. He shoved Eryn and Lyra toward the square. Go to father. Find him. I'll hold them off. Kaelen! No! Eryn shouted, but his brother was already charging, spear levelled, into the smoke. Lyra grabbed Eryn's wrist, pulling him hard. "Come on! He told us what to do, move!" Eryn's legs obeyed, even as his heart screamed otherwise. They darted through the narrow lanes, weaving between panicked villagers, the air thick with smoke and ash. Somewhere, a child wailed. Somewhere else, steel clashed. They found their father near the well, sleeves rolled up, face streaked with soot as he hauled water with the other men. His eyes widened as he saw them. "Eryn! Lyra! Where's Kaelen?" Eryn's voice caught in his throat. He went to fight." The farmer's face darkened, but there was no time for scolding. He thrust a bucket into Eryn's hands. "Then fight with water, boy. Save the village. Go!" Eryn stumbled to obey, his mind a storm of fire and shadow. Lyra was already ahead of him, her arms trembling under the weight of her bucket, yet she did not falter. The night stretched into chaos. Buckets splashed, thatch hissed and smoked, screams tore through the air, and through it all, the armoured raiders advanced, slow and merciless, their black visors glinting. Eryn caught sight of one turning toward Lyra. She had just flung her water onto the flames when the figure strode forward, blade lifting. She froze. "Lyra!" Eryn shouted. Without thinking, without planning, his hands flew upward. Heat surged through his veins, burning hotter than the fires around them. A crack of light split the night, bursting from his palms in a torrent of flame that crashed against the raider's chest. The black figure staggered, armour glowing red, before collapsing into the dirt with a hiss. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of fire. Every villager nearby stopped. Buckets slipped from hands. Faces turned toward the boy in the square, the boy with smoke rising from his palms. Eryn's heart thundered in his chest. He wanted to speak, to explain, to deny. But the words would not come. And then, from beyond the flames, another voice rose harsh, commanding, terrible. "The fire-bearer is found. Take him." That night would be remembered in Greenhollow, not as the night of the raid, nor even the night of the fire. It would be remembered as the night the boy in the barley fields was revealed to be something more. The night destiny claimed Eryn of Greenhollow. Chapter 12. The Path of Stars. The night after the battle, in the Forest of Echoes, lay heavy upon the survivors. A fire smouldered at the centre of the ruined clearing, throwing long, restless shadows across the broken stones. The mist that had once choked the forest floor was gone, burned away by the light that had burst from Elira's sword when the Harrowfang fell. Yet silence still pressed upon them, not the silence of peace, but of waiting as though the world itself held its breath. Lyra sat apart from the others, her sword across her knees. She polished the blade in slow, steady strokes, though it no longer needed cleaning. The steel gleamed unnaturally, catching moonlight even in the deepest dark. It felt alive now, humming faintly in her hands, as if it had awoken with her. Each time she drew the cloth across the metal, she thought of the Harrowfang's eyes, red coals in the fog, the weight of its breath, the terror of its roar. Her heart still thundered when she remembered how close its claws had come. And yet she had not broken. "Still awake?" The voice startled her, though she masked it quickly. Kaelen emerged from the shadows, helm tucked beneath his arm, his face streaked with soot. His armour bore a dozen new dents, each one a memory of the night's battle. "I should ask you the same," Lyra replied softly. Kaelen eased himself down onto a fallen stone beside her, stretching his broad shoulders with a wince. "The men sleep only because they're half dead. They'll need every hour before we march again." "And you?" she asked. "I'll sleep when I'm sure you're still breathing," he said simply. His grey eyes met hers, steady as stone. Lyra felt heat rise to her cheeks, though she forced herself to hold his gaze. You treat me as though I were still a child. You fought like no child I've ever seen, Kaelen said. But you're still the heir of Avelora. If you fall, all this falls with you. She looked down at her sword, tracing the runes that shimmered faintly along its edge. I felt something, she whispered. When I struck the beast, it wasn't only me. It was as if the blade remembered something and lent me its strength. Kaelen frowned. Do you fear it? Lyra shook her head slowly. No, I fear what it means. At the other side of the clearing, Lady Seraphine bent over the rune stones. Her emerald robes brushed the moss, and her staff hummed faintly, its glow answering the faint lines carved into the stone. She had not rested once since the battle's end. Her lips moved silently, her brow furrowed, as though deciphering a puzzle carved by gods. When Lyra finally approached her, she did not look up. These runes are older than this forest, Seraphine murmured, fingers tracing their glowing lines. Older than your keep, older even than the founding of Avelora itself. What do they say? Lyra asked. They are not words, not in the way we know, Seraphine replied. They are bindings, chains made not of iron, but of light. She looked up then, her pale eyes gleaming in the torchlight. And those chains are breaking. Lyra felt the truth of it like a cold stone in her stomach. The Harrowfang. It was not the darkness itself, was it? No, Seraphine said, her voice tight. It was the warden of the gate, a beast set to guard what lies beyond. Before Lyra could speak further, a sound stirred behind them. A voice, low and rough, cut through the night. You are right. The cloaked stranger stepped into the firelight, his hood lowered for the first time. His face was scarred, his jaw sharp, his storm-grey eyes unblinking. The company stirred at once, knights reaching for weapons, villagers whispering, but he raised no blade. I have watched this forest longer than you have walked it, he said. What rose tonight was no accident. The wards weaken, and the vault of cinders stirs. Kaelen stepped forward, hand on his hilt. Speak plainly, wanderer. Who are you, and what do you know of this vault? The stranger's smile was thin, without warmth. Once, long ago, I was called Maelor. I fought when the Shadow King was first chained. I carry the memory of that war, and the scars it left. Gasps rippled through the men. Even Seraphine's face paled. That's impossible, she whispered. No one lives from that age. Not lives, Maelor said, his voice like a blade across stone. Endures. Chapter 13. Maelor's Tale. The fire sank low, yet none dared move from its circle. Maelor's voice held them, heavy and inexorable. The Shadow King was not born of man or god. He was hunger, given flesh, a void that sought only to consume. Kingdoms burned, rivers dried, skies turned black. No blade could wound him, no wall could hold him. He drank the strength of armies as a wolf drinks water. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crackle of flame. Even the children of the villagers leaned forward, wide-eyed, too young to know the weight of the words, but old enough to feel their truth. And yet he was chained, Lyra said, her voice steady though her heart hammered. How? Maelor's gaze fell upon her, sharp as a hawk's. By sacrifice. The magisters of dawn forged chains of light from their very souls. They gave themselves to bind him, body and spirit, beneath the mountains. But their fire was not enough. It needed a bearer, one touched by the light itself, the first daughter of dawn. Lyra felt her breath falter. You mean? Seraphine's eyes blazed. You carry it, princess. The same fire that bound him once flows in you. The words sank into her bones. She had felt it already, the heat in her veins, the way her sword had blazed against the Harrowfang. She had prayed it was only chance, but no, it was truth. Why me? She whispered. Because fate cares nothing for want, Maelor said. His voice was neither cruel nor kind, only certain. The Shadow King stirs, and the chains weaken. When he rises, the world will burn, and only the light can bind him again. Chapter 14. The Oath. By dawn, the decision was made. They could not linger. The vault lay to the south, hidden beneath mountains, where rivers burned and air choked with ash. King Alden stood before the weary company, his cloak torn, his crown dented, yet his presence as steady as ever. "We march," he said, "not only for Avelor, but for every land touched by sun and moon. If the Shadow King breaks his chains, there will be no refuge, no kingdom, no dawn. We may falter, we may fall, but we will stand. We are the shield of the realm, and if we must break, then let us break standing." The men roared their assent, though it was ragged and hoarse. The villagers bowed their heads. Lyra stood at her father's side, her sword belted to her waist. For the first time, she did not feel only heir to Avelora. She felt heir to something greater, older, burning within her blood. When the cheers faded, Maelor spoke softly to her. "You will lead them, not your father." She stiffened. "He is king. He is dying," Maelor said without malice. "The Shadow King will not waste his breath on him. His eyes are on you." Lyra turned away, but the words lodged in her chest like a thorn. Chapter 15. The Broken Company. The march south began at once. They left behind the forest and its haunted stones, moving into lands that bore the first signs of corruption. Fields once golden lay blackened, as if fire had kissed them without flame. Streams ran sluggish, their waters thick and dark. The people began to call themselves the Broken, not in despair, but in grim defiance. Broken shields, broken swords, broken flesh, yet still walking. Each night, Kaelen drilled the knights, forcing discipline into men too tired to stand. Seraphine walked apart, murmuring to herself as her staff glowed faintly. Maelor was always there at the edges, watching like a shadow no one could shake. One evening, as they camped beside a ruined stone bridge, Lyra overheard whispers among the men. Some spoke of turning back, of abandoning the march and fleeing south. She did not intervene, but her chest ached with their fear. That night, when Kaelen found her staring into the dark, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "They will follow you," he said. "They fear me," she replied bitterly. "They fear what you represent," Kaelen corrected. "Hope, and hope is heavier than steel." By the time they reached the first slopes of the mountains, food had grown scarce, the air heavy with ash. And still, ahead, the earth glowed red. Lyra knew the path of stars was leading her to fire. Chapter 16. Ashfall Pass. They climbed into a world that looked as if winter had come and burned. White-grey ash drifted out of a bruised sky, coating cloaks, eyebrows, and the black rock underfoot. It didn't fall like snow. It floated, lazy and sinister, carrying the sour taste of spent flame. Every footstep left a print that filled slowly again until the company seemed to walk on water that remembered the dead. Sir Kaelen set the pace on a narrow goat trail that switchbacked along a sheer drop. Below, a valley lay drowned in smoke. Above, the ridge rose like the spine of some colossal beast. He moved with the patience of a siege, testing each stone before he trusted it with the weight of those behind. When a shale plate skittered loose and rattled into the abyss, he halted the line with a raised fist and waited until even the echoes were gone. Lyra climbed a dozen paces back, sweat stinging her eyes despite the cold. The dawn fire woke inside her whenever the wind shifted the same prickle at the edge of hearing that warned of lightning and lies. Twice she glanced over her shoulder to the wagons they had left days ago. They had been forced to carry the wounded on litters now. 6 men to a stretcher, spirits knotted with guilt for the dead men's weight. A cry rose from the rear. Kaelen spun, sword half drawn before sense returned. The column compressed, shields P. Kaelen spun on his heel, steel rasping as his shield came up in one smooth motion. The air was still a heartbeat before, and then it wasn't. The ash on the trail shifted like breath sucked in through unseen lungs. "Shields!" he barked, his voice carrying like thunder along the line. The men obeyed without thought, slamming their battered shields into place, boots grinding against the narrow path. The mountain answered, with movement. From the grey haze below, shapes surged upward. Not men, not beasts, but things born of ember and hunger. They scrabbled over stone like insects, bodies glowing faintly from within as if a furnace lived under their cracked skins. Emberlings. Their eyes were hollow sparks, their claws obsidian tipped with molten light. Kaelen's shield took the first impact. The creature hit like fire given weight, its claws screeching against steel. Sparks rained down the face of his shield as he shoved forward with a roar, planting his boot into the rock to throw it back. "Line, hold!" he shouted. The knights braced, shields interlocked as the first wave struck. Ash exploded into the air with every impact, the creatures climbing, biting, clawing. Their screeches were shrill, like iron being bent and broken. Behind the line, Princess Lyra already had her sword in hand. She darted to Kaelen's side, her golden hair streaked with soot, eyes blazing. An emberling lunged at her from the edge of the path. She met it mid-leap, her blade slicing through its core. It burst into sparks that hissed and died on the rock. The sword pulsed in her grip the dawnfire, alive, remembering its purpose. The runes along its edge glimmered brighter with each strike, answering the darkness as if hungry for it. Kaelen cast her a quick glance, his expression hard but grateful. "Stay with me." More emberlings swarmed from the mist below, clawing at boots, climbing shields. One latched onto a knight's leg, its molten jaws biting through greaves. The man screamed, falling. Lyra moved before she thought, her palm flashing with light. She pressed her hand against the creature's head, and it vanished in an instant, snuffed out like a candle. The knight stared at her, wide-eyed, before Kaelen hauled him back into the line. No time for thanks. Fight! At the rear, Lady Seraphine raised her staff, green fire arcing outward. She traced sigils in the air, her voice chanting low and fierce. A shimmer spread along the ground like frost, coating the rocks where the emberlings climbed. The moment their claws touched it, their bodies stiffened, cracked, and fell away in brittle shards. Still they came. Still the line held. And then Maelor moved. He had been watching, calm and silent on the ridge above. Now he dropped into the fray with both blades drawn, his movements fluid and unearthly. The rune-etched steel sliced through emberlings like scythes through wheat. Each swing left glowing after-images in the air, each cut scattering sparks. He fought not like a knight, but like someone who had been made for this battle alone. "Lyra!" he called sharply as his blade cut down another. "The light answers you. Use it, don't fear it." Her chest tightened, but she gritted her teeth. Raising her sword, she drew in a breath that felt like fire filling her lungs. The runes blazed to life, and with one sweeping arc, her strike released a wave of golden flame. It washed over the front ranks of the emberlings, consuming them in light. They shrieked as they fell back into the ash, leaving the path momentarily clear. The company gasped at the sight fear, mixing with awe. The ash fell quiet for a heartbeat, only the sound of steel and ragged breathing filling the pass. Kaelen lowered his shield slightly, his voice rough but steady. "The line holds. The mountain doesn't have us yet." Chapter 17. The Red Ford. The wind died as they descended the far slope of Ashfall Pass, and the silence that followed pressed heavier than battle. The men walked in hushed lines, armour rattling softly, their breath visible in the sulphurous air. The ash still drifted, but here it fell thinner, as if the mountain was saving its worst for what lay ahead. By midday, they reached the banks of the river, if it could still be called one. It flowed sluggish and dark, streaked with molten red veins that pulsed faintly, as though the mountain's own blood ran through it. The smell was sharp, metallic, a mix of hot iron and rot. "This is no river," Seraphine whispered, leaning on her staff. "It is the mountain's vein. Its heart lies beyond." Kaelen tested the edge with the tip of his sword. The water hissed and spat, eating a shallow groove into the steel before he pulled it back. He grunted. "Crossing means death." "No," Maelor said. He pointed downstream. "There is a place where the current slows, where the old magisters cut stepping stones into the bedrock, the Red Ford. It is the only way forward." The company followed the bank until the river widened into a shallow stretch. Massive stones jutted from the current, black and slick, their tops worn flat by centuries of molten flow. Steam hissed around them, and the air shimmered with heat. "Two at a time," Kaelen ordered. "Ropes across, shields up." The first knights went, rope tied at their waists, boots smoking as they leapt from stone to stone. They reached the far bank, gasping, armour glowing faintly red. The line tightened as more men crossed. When it came time for Lyra, she took Seraphine's arm, guiding the weary sorceress over the slick stones. Heat burned through her boots, pain stabbing her soles, but she pressed forward. The dawn fire thrummed in her chest, urging her on, steadying her legs. Halfway across, a scream split the air. One of the villagers slipped, plunging into the current. The river took him at once, his flesh blistering, his voice lost beneath the hiss of boiling water. Kaelen swore, teeth clenched. He dragged the next man forward, forcing the column to move faster. The air grew hotter, the stones slicker, but one by one the broken company reached the far side. When at last the final man leapt ashore, Kaelen stumbled. His boot had slipped into the current for a heartbeat too long, and when he tore it free, the leather was gone, flesh beneath it charred and black. Lyra moved to him, panic tightening her chest, but Kaelen waved her back. "Save your strength, princess," he rasped. Maelor crouched, sprinkling silver ash over the wound. The skin cooled, blackened but sealed. Kaelen hissed once, then tightened his jaw. He stood again, towering, unbroken. The ford lay behind them. The mountain's heart waited ahead. Chapter 18. The Black Sanctuary. They found it at twilight, a cleft in the mountainside, cut not by nature but by hands long gone. The rock face bore the marks of chisels, half buried beneath centuries of shifting stone. Inside yawned a cavern, wide and low, its walls black basalt streaked with veins of pale crystal. The company entered cautiously, torches casting long, trembling shadows. The floor was smooth, melted flat by ancient lava, and the air was warmer than the night outside, almost welcoming. At the centre lay a vast bowl carved into the stone, its edges etched with faint star-like channels that radiated outward to smaller basins along the walls. Above each basin, reliefs of figures had been carved, robed magisters raising their hands, warriors casting swords aside, and a crowned woman with a halo-like circlet above her brow. "The Black Sanctuary," Maelor said softly, his storm-grey eyes distant. "Here the first magisters bled their light into chains. Here they learned how to bind a god." Seraphine touched the relief of the crowned woman. "The daughter of dawn," she whispered. "Every age has one. And now she stands among us." Her eyes shifted to Lyra. The princess's heart pounded. She stepped down into the central bowl, her boots echoing softly. She set her sword across her palms, closing her eyes. She did not summon the light, she remembered. Her father's voice at a winter fire, Kaelen's steady hand in training, Seraphine's counsel, the faces of the men who had already fallen. She remembered them all. And the dawn fire rose, not like a storm, but like sunrise. The channels in the floor lit one by one, golden light flowing outward into the basins. The reliefs glowed. The crowned woman's circlet blazed bright as a star. The company gasped as the sanctuary itself seemed to awaken ancient power, answering the presence of its heir. King Alden stepped forward, his spear in one hand. His crown, dented and blackened by ash, glimmered faintly in the glow. He looked at his daughter, pride and sorrow mingling in his eyes. "You are more than my heir," he said. "You are the world's." He reversed her sword and offered it back to her, hilt first, as though she were already queen. Elira's hand shook as she accepted it. For the first time, she felt the weight not just of her bloodline, but of destiny itself. Chapter 19. The Shadow Within. The light dimmed suddenly. A hush fell over the sanctuary. The torches flickered, shadows bending strangely against the walls. Kaelen raised his shield. Something's here. The air thickened. From the far wall, a stain of darkness spread a shadow, moving where there was no light to cast it. It rose and stretched, shaping itself into something vaguely human, yet wrong. Its face was a shifting patchwork of stolen memories. A mother's smile, a child's laugh, a lover's eyes. All layered atop one another, grotesque and false. The men recoiled. One knight dropped his sword, trembling. "Don't look at it," Maelor barked. "It feeds on what you want most." The shadow lunged. Kaelen met it head-on, shield braced. The impact rattled the whole chamber, the shield groaning under its weight. The shadow bent around him, slipping past the steel as if it were smoke. Seraphine thrust her staff forward, green fire lashing out. The shadow shrieked a sound that never touched the air, but clawed directly at the heart. "Lyra!" Kaelen shouted, straining against the press of the darkness. "Now!" The dawn fire surged in her veins. She stepped into the bowl's centre, raising her sword high. Golden light burst from the blade, cutting through the gloom like dawn breaking over a storm. The shadow froze, its stolen faces peeling away, withering in the brilliance. Lyra slashed downward. The shadow split apart, shattering into tendrils that evaporated into smoke. In its place, only silence remained. Maelor moved quickly, producing a small crystal vial from his cloak. He caught the last wisp of shadow inside it, sealing it with a stopper etched in runes. The vial glowed faintly dark, as though holding a fragment of night itself. Kaelen eyed him warily. "That thing nearly broke the line. Why keep it?" Maelor slipped the vial away. "Because what is bound can be studied, and what is studied can be slain." Lyra lowered her sword, the glow fading. Her breath trembled, but she stood tall. The sanctuary was quiet again, but the company knew the truth. The shadows had already found them. The vault was awake.